Are you stuck trying to decide something? Do you know that something needs to change and you're trying to figure out what your next step should be, but you're not coming to a clear answer? Being stuck in indecision is painful. We always feel better if we decide, because once we decide, we know what we need to do next and we can take off when we can do that. In this video, I'm going to show you what can actually help you get out of this stuck place and why it's a lot simpler than you might be thinking. So here's what a lot of us don't realize at first about being in a place of indecision. It's not so much that we don't know what to do, or that we don't know how to decide, or that we're bad decision makers. It's that we're trying to decide too much at once. When life is in a place of transition, when we know that we need to go into a new chapter of our lives, our minds want certainty. We want the map in front of us laid out so we know we take step A, B, C, and D to get to this next chapter in our lives. And we want to know exactly what that next chapter is going to be. I know, because I've gone through this so many times. And these times are difficult because we're like, what is the next step? I'm not sure what the next step is. For example, when I was working for the corporation and I felt the first little whispers of longing to do something else, and I was considering running my own business, I was terrified. I was like, how could I ever do that? If I weren't actually working for an employer, I'd have my own health insurance I'd have to take care of. I'd be doing everything myself, all the billing, all the invoicing, all the collecting payments. I'd have to find work. I mean, all these things just felt way overwhelming. And now when I look back at it, I was like, this has all just become second nature to me now that I've been running my own business for over 25 years. But when we're in the place, it can all look so huge to us. And so if we're trying to make a decision about what to do next, trying to decide it all at one point is impossible, but that's what we end up doing. We're trying to decide who we're going to be, what this next chapter is going to be, how it's going to play out, and how we're going to get there. When we're in this place of trying to figure it all out, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out this whole big thing, the whole map. We want it all in front of us before we take any step at all. And that is the problem. The reason why this is a problem is because we can't think ourselves into a future that we haven't lived yet. When we're trying to think through something, we're pulling on all the experience that we already have. But if we're stepping into something we've never done before, like when I was leaving the corporation, I'm stepping into running my own business. I've never run my own business before, so there's no way that I can map it all out in one spot before I take a single step toward it. It's just an impossible thing to do because I had no experience to base this new step on, if that makes sense. So when we're in that place and we're trying to decide everything and we're trying to get this map laid out for us, we tend to stall. We stay stuck. We go round and round and round this thing. Should I do it? Should I not do it? So if I'm sitting there and I'm working for the corporation, I've got my paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. I got my health insurance covered. I know my schedule is going to be day in, day out. Choices that I need to make are very limited. And I'm thinking of stepping into something that is totally opposite that, totally insecure, where everything would be on my head to do. There's no way that corporate me, working for an employer me, could know what running your own business me would need to be able to know and be to be able to make this next chapter work. And this is the way it always works whenever we're facing any sort of a change. So let's talk about some of the reasons why the brain lets us down at times like this and why trying to think your way through to the next step is not going to work. Okay, I want to relieve you of that burden right now. I want to relieve you of the burden of thinking you have to figure this out logically. Reason number one is that you're trying to make a choice with incomplete information. When you're in transition, you're standing between what you know and what you don't know, what is ending and what hasn't started yet. That's where you are. And your brain hates that. Our brains want certainty. Our brains want things they can measure, compare, and plan around. But when we're in these places, we don't have any of that. So what happens is the mind fills up the spaces of what it's lacking with what it always fills up the spaces with, and that's fear and worry and doubt and anxiety. It goes through all these what-if scenarios because it's trying to solve for every possible outcome. For example, I'm thinking of moving from my corporate job to being a freelancer. What does my brain do? Comes up with all the nightmare scenarios. What if I don't get enough clients and I don't make enough money? What if I can't pay my rent? What if I end up having to go back to work for this company because I couldn't make it work? So many of these worries and anxieties come up because there are so many blank spaces. that the brain doesn't have the information to fill. So if you've been stuck, it's not because you're bad at decision making or that somehow you're not strong enough to make a decision and move forward. It's none of that stuff that we may hear around us. It's because we're trying to make a future-proof choice without having lived that future yet. Okay, so the second reason why we can get stuck in indecision is because the brain confuses discomfort with danger. So whenever we're facing a big life transition, changing a job, changing a relationship, moving to a new location, our nervous system doesn't see that as personal growth. It sees this as dangerous. Studies in neuroscience have found that uncertainty activates the same regions of the brain that are involved in detecting threats to our personal safety. And then the body also reacts like something's wrong. So we're sitting there thinking about this future, and the brain starts detecting this unknown thing, this uncertain thing, and it starts feeding us fear, worry, and anxiety, and suddenly we're worried and anxious. We feel that in our physical selves as well. When the brain tries to contemplate this unknown future, it sees this as a threat, it transfers it to the body, we start to feel anxious and worried. In the moment, is going to make us feel like we should hold back, that we shouldn't do that is the wrong decision. When in truth, all that is the brain responding to uncertainty and sending those messages to the body. Once the stress response kicks in, most of us at that point no longer put clarity as our top priority. I mean, going into this, we wanted clarity. We wanted to figure this out. We wanted to know what this next step would be. But when the stress response kicks in, our priorities change because now we just want relief. We just want the stress to stop. We want the anxiety and worry and fear to stop. The relief becomes our top priority. We get tired of thinking about it. We get tired of making our pros and cons list. We get tired of second guessing ourselves. And we get tired of worrying about choosing the wrong thing. At that point, the brain knows this. The brain wants to protect us. So it starts looking for a shortcut. And that shortcut could be any decision that promises to stop the pain. And this is the dangerous part. Whenever we're facing a life transition, we're in that place of indecision. It's very painful. The priority no longer is clarity. The priority changes to relief and a stop to the pain. And so the brain starts looking for any way to do that for us. This is when the pressure to choose just feels unbearable. And we'll do almost anything to escape it. What might we do that would be the wrong decision for ourselves long term? Well, we can rush into a decision that's not right for us. We can make a choice that doesn't fit where we want it to go. Or we can just avoid the decision entirely to try to get temporary peace. In other words, we'll say, okay, well, I guess I don't need to make the change right now. I'll just forget about it. That's what so often happens. It can happen in relationships too. We'll just stay here a little bit longer. And all of us usually go through that several times because unfortunately we have to let the pain of the situation we're in get bad enough that we're willing to risk the danger of making another choice. But oftentimes when we're in that place of indecision, we're so wanting that relief that we can just, toss off all these pulls we've been feeling to do something else and just decide to stay where we are. Unfortunately, that short-term relief doesn't last because that keeps the whole long-term problem alive. If we are unhappy or no longer fitting in the lives we're in, and we know that we need to make a change, deciding to give ourselves relief by just not deciding and just staying where we are isn't solving the problem, right? It can give us temporary relief, and sometimes we need that, but it is not going to solve the problem over the long term because the issues we were having in the lives that we're in are still going to be there. They're not just going to magically disappear. One of the things that's so difficult about a life transition is that we can end up going through this kind of thing several times. So let's talk about what finally breaks that cycle and how to start building decisions that bring you clarity instead of anxiety. If you take nothing else from this video, I hope you'll remember this. You can't decide it all right now. You don't have the full picture yet. And that's not failure. That's just timing. That's just reality. That's just life. When your life is changing, you can't map out the whole next chapter from where you're standing right now. It's impossible. You can only see the edges of it. The places that are tugging at you or compelling you or pulling you toward this other place. The moments that make you curious. The little signals that you're catching that something is changing. So we don't want to force this one big overall huge decision on ourselves. We don't want to back ourselves into a corner with some permanent decision that we can't change in the beginning. Instead, what we want to do is start with some very small, temporary, little decisions. Don't need a 10-year plan at this point. Don't need a 1-year plan. Don't need a 6-month plan. All you have to have is one real-world piece of feedback. So let's talk about how we get that. Clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from movement, from testing the waters and seeing what you discover. So think about it like this. If you're thinking about changing careers, don't start by trying to name your brand new dream job. That's too big. Instead, start small. So maybe you have a conversation with someone who's doing what you're thinking you might want to do and just see what they say about it and see how that lands with you. Maybe you take a class. Maybe you learn something that you would need to be able to do this other thing you're thinking about. Just see how that strikes you. Maybe you spend a weekend volunteering in a space that feels connected to what you're wanting to do, or maybe what you're missing in your life. In any of these situations, if you're not sure what to do next, whether to stay or go or take a next step, and it could be about a job, it could be about a relationship, it could be about where you're living right now, it could be like what your goals are in life. There's ever a decision you need to make and you're feeling that there needs to be a change. All you have to do is run a small experiment. So for me, if I continue the example of when I was working for the corporation and I was thinking about wanting to do my own thing, I finally got wise and decided to take a small step, to run a small experiment. So I took a small task on the side and I started doing some freelance work at night and on the weekends just to see how it might go. That gave me the chance to test the waters of doing my own business, of being a freelancer. It gave me the chance to get a job, to get a project, to set my rates, to invoice it when I was finished, to create a relationship with this client, to set up my records and how I was going to keep track of everything, to get my business up and running, what my business name was going to be, to register it, doing business ads, all these things. Taking just one or two little jobs on the side that I could do in my off hours gave me a chance to test the waters, to see how this might work, to see if there might be people who would want me to work for them outside of my corporate work, to see if I liked that, to see if I could manage that. You can do the same thing. Make one little tiny experiment, change one little tiny variable. Maybe you work from a different place for a week. You take a short trip alone and you just notice how you respond. How does your body respond? How does your mind respond? How does it feel? When you take these little small moves, what you get is feedback. You step into the unknown just a little bit and you gather information. And that's information that your brain loves, that it can then use to plan the next little step, the next little experiment. Because your brain does so much better at handling these little tiny steps than it does trying to figure everything out at once when it has no idea. Right? So you take this little step. I took these little jobs, these little things on the side, and I had some clients I was working with. I completed the jobs, I invoiced them, I set up my business, I talked to a CPA, I got everything going. My brain can say, you know what, I kind of like this. This is kind of cool. I would like to do some more of this. So take another couple of jobs, get another couple of clients online. In that way, we gradually lead ourselves into whatever the next step is that we want to take. And at that point, we're not asking the brain to come up with our next step based on theories or guesses or imaginings. But at that point, we're giving ourselves lived data that we can then use to determine the next step after that. Once you have some of that lived data, then your decisions stop feeling like they're just leaps of faith, and they start feeling like steps that you can actually trust. Research shows that small, even little steps like this can help reduce decision anxiety because they give your nervous system something solid to work with. It's no longer guessing, it's actually observing. And that is your way out of the indecision spiral. The other thing that's cool about doing these little experiments is that it tends to help us separate just a little from our own lives. We're in the middle of these transitions. We're worried, we're anxious, we're fearful, we're overwhelmed. If you step back a little bit and say, okay, I'm feeling pulled toward this. Let me just take one little small step toward that and let me see what happens. If you go into it with the attitude that you're just gathering data, you're just going to see what happens with this, it tends to help you separate just a little bit from your own life so it's not tearing up your emotions so much. If we can gain a little distance from our own lives and start observing as if we were almost someone outside of them, we can often think so much clearer. I don't know if you've ever had it happen where you've taken a vacation, maybe you were gone for a week, and you can see things so much clearer when you're away for that week. If you really get away and you don't, completely, you're not still working, you're not still staying in touch, whatever, you really get away and you can see things from that distance. It's amazing how clear they become. When we can separate ourselves just a little bit from our own lives. And we can do this when we say, you know what, I'm just going to run this experiment. I'm just going to try this, see what happens, collect the data, write down what you felt, what happened, what you did, what your test was, what the outcome was, what the data is. All of this separates you just enough to help clarify your thinking so that the decision about your next little test, your next little step becomes so much easier. So if you're caught in an indecision spiral right now, here's something small you can try this week. Instead of asking yourself, what is the right choice? Maybe you've been banging your head against the wall over this. Ask yourself this instead. What's one small thing I can test? Just one. So you might have a conversation you've been avoiding. You might take a class doing something that's been calling to you. You might spend an afternoon doing something you've said you don't have the time to do. And just see what happens. See what stirs up. See how you feel. See what you think. Do you feel a little lighter, a little more curious? Do you feel calmer? Or did something tighten up or shrink inside you? Did your energy drop? Those are your clues. Each one gives you a tiny bit of information about what's true for you right now. And that is how you start moving forward again. Not by finding certainty about everything you're going to do for the next 5 years, but by simply noticing the signals that your life is already sending and making little experiments, little tests, little steps toward that to see what you find. If you want help with that, my free guide, The Signals Journal, will walk you through 7 of the most common signs that your life is asking for a change right now and help you start making sense of them. You can find that totally for free at the link below. And if you've been spinning in indecision, I'm sorry. I know how difficult it is. But don't worry, you don't have to decide it all right now. Just pause, listen, observe, and then take one tiny step. Thanks for being here. If you found value in this video, please like and subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend if you think they might enjoy it. And check out the next video I have coming up on the end screen for more information on finding clarity for your next step. And remember, your life's plotting something, so you might as well start eavesdropping. I'll see you next time.